Ben's studio just got rid of 30% of their team, and it's part of a pattern that's been over 1,000 PlayStation developers laid off over the last year and a half. Of course, all while the company is posting record profits. Delightful. Now, there is a reason why. What PlayStation are doing right now is they are quietly restructuring the studios that built their empire, because as, we've kind of all noticed, things really did go off track for a bit. Now, this is obviously being framed as a good thing, to investors, but the language that we'll see today does include some really nice quotes, like, quote, strong cost controls and rigorous budget oversight. That does imply that the changes will be good for short-term investor confidence. Perhaps not for the developers, perhaps not for the games, perhaps not for you. Now, I'm a gamer, you're a gamer, and you know what we're like. So, my fellow gamers, come to the front of the class, it's time for a lesson. Part of this is how I went from awful sleep to fantastic sleep, and how today's sponsor, Manta Sleep, has been a huge help in that. So what Manta does is actually really simple. They make the best sleep mask that there is, and that's important because most sleep masks absolutely suck. I just could not find a comfortable one until I came across Manta last winter, and that's really when I started trying to take sleep way more seriously in my life. I mean, as an MMO gamer, I've often not been particularly good to my body in that regard, and it's hard to describe just how much better life is without constant onset insomnia, and now I've even got the sleep scores to prove it, and Manta is a huge part of my kit. So the way it works, right, is you get the core Manta sleep mask. It's absolutely terrific, but what sets them apart is customization. You can get cooling pads, weighted pads, and even a Bluetooth mask. Now, combine that with white noise, maybe some rain, a spooky story, or my go-to podcast, The Rest is History, and you'll find you not only drift off, but you actually just stay asleep, you build a stronger circadian rhythm, and that just helps you basically enjoy life more and stay on track. Manta's kit is absolutely fantastic, and you'll get 10% off using my link and code Bellular News. You may be wondering why we're just seeing these changes now. Well, the reason why is PlayStation just released their 2025 business report. It doesn't make for an exciting read, but there is important stuff in it. And here's what really matters. The longtime CEO, Jim Ryan, left a year ago, and the new leadership took over, and they're in the form of CEO and Studios head Herman Hulst. And they basically just laid out their vision of things to investors. There's plenty to rip into, but also some unambiguous wins, so I'm going to do those first. Mongolian PC gamers, good news, your time has come. So Helldivers 2, Spider-Man 2, God of War Ragnarok, they are all playable on PC in Mongolia and a few other countries as well. Basically, the whole PSN account requirement thing is gone, the one that gave us all of the drama. That does make, then, PlayStation games far more available. Now, there are some caveats. Japan has got limited versions, Vietnam still bans Steam, sanctioned territories like North Korea obviously can't play, but as for the rest of the globe, well, PlayStation games are ours to enjoy on PC. And we actually, right now, have immediate proof of why it matters. Stellar Blade just sold 1 million copies on Steam alone, right? That's pretty damn good. Obviously, it's a game that launched with no region locks, sales exploded, and analyst Daniel Ahmad pointed out a few other reasons why. The PC release has got more audio dubbing options, it runs really well, it's a great port even on lower-end hardware, and well-adjusted regional pricing. And that matters in light of this, the big number. 53% of its Steam reviews are in Chinese. So clearly, going global actually does matter. Dropping the PSN restriction is a pretty big win for a lot of the world. And with that covered, we can now dive into the major findings from the report. More PC ports are coming. It's clear that stuff's working real well for them now, but Herman, the studio's CEO, said that they will be, quote, thoughtful about how they do that. And there is a reason why. One of those reasons I'd say is Microsoft are kind of weak. They're dominating hardware, and ultimately, what they need is for the PlayStation hardware platform moat to stay strong. Of course, that ain't great news if you don't own a PlayStation, but I'd actually argue that a requirement to simultaneously ship on PC as well, that just increases the chances of everyone getting a bad port. Looking at you, Capcom, with Monster Hunter. So I think that's kind of fine. And there is a learning from it. That Sony are clearly willing to forego easy money now in favor of keeping their platform strong, I think actually does show a whole bunch of confidence in what they're doing. I mean, it's literally the game that Microsoft can no longer play. And here's what justifies that confidence. 5 years in, they have finally got more monthly active users on PS5 than on PS4. And to enthusiasts like myself, that's insane. I cannot imagine playing in like a 2012, whatever it is, base edition console where everything is 10 pixels at 3 frames a second. Okay, it's a bit absurd, but you get my point. But no, that old audience base was huge. So right now, it has ticked over. It still is close. It's somewhere between 50 and 60% of their combined 124 million monthly active users. But what really matters more to Sony is this. PS5 users spend significantly more money in things, which obviously stands to reason. They bought a PS5. Put simply, if you're a PS4 user, then you and your cohort are less likely to buy DLC or to spend money in services like PS Plus. And to really get a lot of those people to move over, PlayStation will need something truly massive and impossible to ignore. I think pretty obviously, GTA 6. They need something like that to convince the casuals to upgrade. And to prove just how big that PS4 market has been, like the new Call of Duty game, Black Ops 7, is still going to be shipping on a base Xbox One. Insane. Anyway, for the hardcore people, they're on PS5, they're spending more money, and this might explain why Hulst also won't rule out a subscription price increase. That's actually because even after the price hike they did last year, they found that the highest tier of PS Plus grew 22%. And in the report, they try to get across the idea that everything now orbits PS5 and extending its reach and everything is successful. They say that Portal was highlighted as a major success. Doesn't make a massive amount of sense to me, but they found that it extends playtime by 30% because people play longer into the evening. There is, of course, though, PSVR. In this report, it was completely forgotten. It really does seem a bit dead in the water to me, and it's kind of funny that Microsoft's new VR attempt with Xbox is just a co-branded Meta Quest. With all that said, there's something that you and I are probably thinking at the same time, which is, yeah, okay, obviously PlayStation are way far ahead. That actually makes sense. They had good exclusives. Maybe not all the ones that you would want, but, you know, they certainly didn't have a Microsoft-shaped situation, right? You know, is it their victory or is it Microsoft's defeat? Well, one of the things we can at least say is the quality of the games, in many cases, has been damn good. We can laugh at Concord, but, you know, ghosts existing, all of that stuff. So for PlayStation, they live and die on video games. And that is where, that's where things get more interesting today. In the report, PlayStation positioned themselves as two things, being the best place to play and the best place to publish. Now, we've already covered the hardware story. On the software side, right? Call of Duty being primarily played in PlayStation matters to their plans, but they do need first-party exclusives as well. Otherwise, what are they going to eventually port over to PC? What will they go and adapt into TV and movie projects? So, the whole single-player strategy is staying the same for them. Same developers, same model for success, where they want at least one tentpole title every year. On top of that, they're investing in games from Korea, China, and India, examples like, say, Stellar Blade, but basically, the teams making like Wolverine, Ghost of Yotai, Intergalactic, they're just going to keep on doing what they're doing, trucking along. So, on that front, from your perspective, nothing really changes. But from the developer perspective, things have changed, and we will get to that. Obviously, though, there's live services. We cannot ignore that. And in PlayStation's eyes, Helldivers and Concord just represent the two extremes. And that's, of course, where we get to Marathon's delay. It is being carefully managed to avoid Concord's mistakes. We did a deeper dive into that if you'd like more. It's actually fairly interesting. It's a little bit of PlayStation realizing, oh, we should probably pay attention to if the games are good or not. A shocking innovation for the big burly, important and well-compensated businessman. Anyway, PlayStation still want their two pillars, single-player games and live service games. What they're doing is picking specific genre niches and trying to deliver within them. But we've learned something rather crucial here. Take a look at, say, Marvel Tokon Fighting Souls. That's a partnership with Marvel and Arc Systems Works. Now that as a partnership makes a lot of sense to reduce risk, but it's backed by Sony's XDev studio, basically to give you that Sony polished feel. Now they've also created internal teams like Team LFG and Dark Outlaw just for live service. And even the Bluepoint and Ben Studios cancelled projects actually fit into this pattern. I think this is where, from an audience perspective, it kind of gets interesting and honestly a little bit painfully obvious. So here's the why in Herman's words. We have reviewed our processes in light of Concord. We need to deeply understand why the title failed. We must ensure we don't make the same mistakes again. Damn, Herman, you took you a while, but yeah. Now, this, of course, is all coming as they're talking about Marathon's testing, which, for investor confidence, is a really important thing, because they get two big misses that sort of are in the similar like genre, similar feel, then that will just make people think, oh shit, they don't know what they're doing. Leadership have lost the plot. And that's the narrative they're overtly trying to counter. I mean, when they talk about the marathon testing, they said, quote, some feedback has been varied, which in corporate speak basically means shit. We need to put a lot more work into this. He's just never going to say it like that, but basically it's going to be constant testing, iteration, more testing. That's how they're framing all of this stuff. It does actually make sense. It is what is best for investor confidence. Also, you know, for players, because funnily enough, the game has to be good, you know, broad strokes, for both the investors and the players to actually be happy. Now, what that's led to then is a lot of PlayStation-led changes to how developers work. And this is all part of the wider, but more subtle shift since Jim Ryan left. What does all this fluff actually mean? Well, basically, Sony won't let another Concord reach the public without central leadership. That's the important thing, having more of a say in the matter. That means fewer risks, that means fewer surprises, and it's an ideology that is spreading company-wide. Outsourcing, co-development partners, top-down portfolio management, it is all implying more business control over developer plans, which in so many ways can sound awful, but we do have a lot of examples of developers, well, going nowhere fast and that leading to loads of problems. And ultimately, some of the slop that we get is because something is shot out the door in 18 months to please management. But maybe you could argue that if management was more involved, more intelligent, and more understanding of development earlier on in the project, then maybe those two sides would be able to work together more harmoniously, and maybe we'd have, like, vaguely sane projects. I don't know. What it also means, though, is avoiding another 2023. That was a notable year because they only had MLB and Spider-Man 2. And I say only because they want one tentpole game per year, which they did get that year, but they want more, not just, say, MLB. What they need is a pipeline that's delivering consistently. And that's actually where we can look at Xbox. Because for all of their faults, they are publishing first-party games pretty goddamn constantly, and most of them are topping PlayStation sales charts. But it's very much the case that PlayStation's framing is one of, now we are being more involved, more informed, and we're not just piling lots of money into developers purely in hopes and dreams. It is essentially painting a picture of decisions under Jim Ryan's leadership being not particularly smart, not particularly cost-controlled, not particularly responsible, which obviously has led to, well, I'd say countless, but no, it is actually countable, but let's just say a shitload of live service games that have, of course, been cancelled. So whenever Herman Hulst says this, he's basically saying that the prior management, that the prior strategy was the opposite of this. So here are his words. Strong cost controls, more rigorous budget oversight, an evolved portfolio framework for informed choices, balancing profit potential with associated risks. That's what he says he's going to start doing. That's what he's basically accusing the prior era of. If you want to see some of that corporate doublespeak in action, here's one example. Bend Studio and their 30% layoffs. Their live service game was cancelled after it went through the new oversight processes. Now they've got something new spinning up, but clearly a decision was taken that even though they've got something new spinning up, they're still going to make those cost reductions and get rid of that headcount while the new thing is spinning up. That does mean that they're losing talent, but it also means they're controlling cost. And whenever he says strong cost controls, that's basically what he means. Question for you and me, though, is whether the experience that they lose by focusing so much on the cost control is in the long run worth the money that they're saving. Putting it all together then, we've got a new model for how we believe PlayStation to actually run in the future. So as we look at everything that will happen, this is what we'll be thinking. PlayStation leadership plans to get more from less. Tighter portfolio control, stricter development processes, more outsourcing, more control of fixed costs, less leniency whenever developers miss targets. And we did see hints of this after the Insomniac hack, where senior leadership discussed making PlayStation mandated cuts with their development plans. But now it seems that everyone at PlayStation may face this throughout all development. As much as, listening to my own words earlier on in this video, you can see a lot of sense in what Herman is saying, what he's trying to project about the failures of the past, and how they're going to be different now. If that basically just means the finance department is looming over every decision, well, we've seen that go bad. We've seen that erode the magic, the sort of magic that has actually led to some of the best games ever, the sorts of games that, put PlayStation on the map with their modern software. But what they're now expecting is that same caliber of software, but one per year for those big tentpoles with the live services, more games, more often, more successes, less failures. And they think that a firmer hand on the wheel is what's going to deliver that for them. But as to whether it will work, that is very obviously the question that every PlayStation fan should be asking. And as we proceed into the new console generation, you do wonder if Microsoft, once they have more of their act together, now that they have so many studios, if they'll be in a position where they have loads of fan-favorite games, but not the console install base, and a position where on the software front, Sony may look a little bit weaker, but of course, with the hardware install base. Let me know what you're thinking, and look, if you want a video that's honestly a little bit more entertaining, because it is pretty damn juicy, 2 studios, layoffs just after their games came out. You can watch it next. It's pretty fun.